The early morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty plains of Arizona Territory as Elizabeth Vance stared vacantly at the doctor's worn wooden desk, his words still ringing in her ears like a death knell. "I'm sorry, Miss Vance, but your condition is permanent. You will never bear children." At 26, Elizabeth had just been handed what felt like a life sentence in a territory where a woman's worth was often measured by the children she could bring into the world. Elizabeth tucked a loose strand of auburn hair behind her ear and straightened her back, refusing to let Dr. Collins see her crumble. "Thank you for your honesty, Doctor. I suspected as much after consulting physicians in Boston and Chicago." Her voice remained steady despite the hollow ache spreading through her chest. Dr. Collins, a gray-haired man with kind eyes that had witnessed too much suffering on the frontier, nodded sympathetically. "The scarring from your childhood fever is extensive. Medicine hasn't advanced enough to overcome such damage." "I understand." Elizabeth gathered her reticule and stood, smoothing the wrinkles from her navy blue traveling dress. "I appreciate your time." "Miss Vance," Dr. Collins called as she reached for the door, "there's more to life out here than motherhood. Don't let this define you." Elizabeth offered a small smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Of course not. Good day, Doctor." Stepping onto the wooden boardwalk of Copper Creek's main street, Elizabeth inhaled deeply, fighting back tears. The frontier town bustled with morning activity, merchants opening their shops, cowboys ambling toward the saloon, and women gossiping outside the general store. Elizabeth had arrived just 3 weeks prior to take ownership of her late uncle's bookshop, the last place she'd expected to end up after her parents' passing left her with few options in Boston. The bookshop sat at the quieter end of the street, its faded signs swinging gently in the morning breeze. Vance Books and Curiosities had been her sanctuary since arriving, a place where she could lose herself in the stories that lined the shelves and forget the emptiness that had followed her west. As Elizabeth approached the shop, she noticed a horse tied to the hitching post outside, a magnificent black stallion with a white blaze down its face. A customer, and it wasn't even 9 o'clock. Composing herself and pushing her medical diagnosis to the back of her mind, Elizabeth unlocked the shop door to find a tall figure browsing the bookshelves, his broad shoulders and worn leather vest instantly marking him as one of the local ranchers or cowboys. "Good morning," she called, setting her reticule on the counter. "I apologize for not being here when you arrived." The man turned, and Elizabeth felt a peculiar flutter in her chest. He stood well over 6 feet with sun-bronzed skin that spoke of long days under the Arizona sun. Dark hair curled from beneath his hat, and his eyes, an unusual shade of gray-blue, regarded her with open curiosity. "No apology needed, madam," he replied, his voice carrying a hint of Texas beneath its pleasantness. "I was just admiring your collection. Didn't expect to find Emerson and Thoreau in a town like Copper Creek." Elizabeth's eyebrows rose in surprise. Cowboys who read transcendentalist philosophy were not common in her limited experience. "You're familiar with their work?" A smile creased the corners of his eyes. "A man can wrangle cattle and appreciate good literature, Mississippi."
Vance.
Elizabeth Vance. She moved behind the counter, still guarded but intrigued. "And you are?"
Bryce O'Malley.
He removed his hat, revealing thick dark hair in need of a trim. "Most folks call me Bryce. I own the Double Circle Ranch about 10 miles north of town." Elizabeth had heard the name. The Double Circle was one of the larger cattle operations in the territory. "What can I help you find today, Mr. O'Malley?" "Actually, I was hoping to find a copy of Whitman's Leaves of Grass. My last one met an unfortunate end during a creek crossing." Elizabeth couldn't help but smile at the image of a cowboy reading poetry while driving cattle. "I believe I have one copy left." She moved to the poetry section, aware of his gaze following her. "You have eclectic taste for a rancher." "And you have quite a vocabulary for a bookseller," he countered good-naturedly. "I was a teacher in Boston before coming west." Elizabeth located the volume and returned to the counter. My uncle left me this shop when he passed. Samuel Vance was your uncle? Bryce's expression softened. He was a good man. Helped me build my library when I first settled here 8 years ago. Elizabeth ran her fingers over the book's leather binding. I didn't know him well. We corresponded occasionally, but I hadn't seen him since I was a child. He spoke of a niece back east. Said she had a mind sharper than a new razor. Bryce placed his hat on the counter and reached for the book. What brings you to Arizona Territory, Miss Vance? Teaching positions are scarce out here, but the children could certainly benefit from education. The question struck too close to the morning's painful revelation. Elizabeth's practiced smile faltered. Change of scenery, she replied, her tone making it clear the subject was closed. That will be 75 cents. Bryce studied her face for a moment before nodding and reaching into his pocket. He placed a silver dollar on the counter. Keep the change. Consider it a welcome to Copper Creek gift. That's not necessary, please. His eyes met hers, and something in their depths made Elizabeth hesitate. Your uncle helped me feel at home when I was new here. Allow me to return the favor. Elizabeth slid the book toward him. Thank you, Mr. O'Malley. I hope you enjoy Whitman's words a second time around. Bryce picked up his hat and tucked the book into his saddlebag, visible through the shop window. The best words bear repeating, Miss Vance. He settled his hat on his head and paused at the door. The town's hosting a harvest dance this Saturday. Might be a good way to meet your neighbors. I'm not much for dancing, Elizabeth replied automatically. Neither am I, he admitted with a wry grin. But the apple pie contest alone is worth the trip. Mrs. Hollister's cinnamon crumble would make a dead man sit up and ask for seconds. Despite herself, Elizabeth laughed the first genuine laugh since receiving the doctor's news. I'll consider it. That's all I ask. With a tip of his hat, Bryce O'Malley stepped out into the morning sun, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the shop floor. Elizabeth watched through the window as he untied his horse, swung effortlessly into the saddle, and rode away. Only when he disappeared around the corner did she realize she was still smiling. The remainder of the day passed in a blur of customers and transactions. Elizabeth kept herself busy reorganizing shelves and unpacking a shipment of new books that had arrived from Denver. But beneath her composed exterior, two conversations replayed in her mind: the devastating news from Dr. Collins and the unexpected meeting with Bryce O'Malley. By closing time, Elizabeth's head throbbed with fatigue. She locked the shop door and climbed the narrow staircase to her living quarters above the store. The two-room apartment was sparsely furnished but comfortable, with a small kitchen, a sleeping area, and a sitting room lined with her personal book collection. Elizabeth changed into her nightgown and sat at the small writing desk by the window that overlooked the main street. Below, the saloon was coming to life with piano music and raucous laughter. She dipped her pen in ink and began writing in her journal. September 15th, 1885 today confirmed what I have long suspected. The childhood fever that nearly claimed my life at 12 has ensured I shall never know the joy of motherhood. Dr. Collins was kind but direct. The damage is irreversible. She paused, the pen hovering over the paper as tears finally came, dropping onto the page and blurring the ink. For years, Elizabeth had prepared herself for this verdict, consulting doctors in Boston, then Chicago when she'd traveled west. Each had given increasingly pessimistic assessments, but some part of her had continued to hope. Now, at 26, she had to accept her reality. In a world where a woman's primary purpose was considered to be bearing and raising children, what place was there for her? Elizabeth wiped her eyes and continued writing. I also met a most unusual rancher today, one Brian O'Malley, who quotes Emerson and reads Whitman. He invited me to the harvest dance, though I suspect it was merely a neighborly gesture. Still, there was something in his manner that was disarming. Elizabeth closed her journal and moved to the window, gazing out at the stars emerging above the rugged landscape. Perhaps coming west had been a mistake. In Boston, she'd had friends, connections through her parents, and the possibility of continuing her teaching career despite her unmarried status. Here, she was a curiosity, an educated Eastern spinster running a bookshop in a frontier town. Yet something about Copper Creek called to her. Perhaps it was the vastness of the land, the sense of possibility that hung in the air despite the harsh realities of frontier life. Or maybe it was simply that no one here knew her history, her disappointments, or her limitations. Elizabeth climbed into bed and extinguished the lamp. Tomorrow would bring more curious customers, more questioning glances, and more adjustments to her new life. But for tonight, she allowed herself to remember the unexpected warmth of a genuine smile from a cowboy who read poetry. Saturday evening arrived with a warm breeze carrying the scent of autumn. Elizabeth stood before her mirror, adjusting the lace collar of her best dress, a deep green cotton with modest bustle that complemented her auburn hair. She'd spent the day debating whether to attend the harvest dance, alternating between determination to establish herself in the community and anxiety about facing the inevitable questions about her background and marital status. "This is foolishness," she muttered to her reflection, pinning her hair into a neat chignon. "You're a grown woman, not some debutante seeking approval." Yet as she descended the stairs and locked the shop behind her, Elizabeth couldn't deny the flutter of nerves in her stomach. It had been years since she'd attended a social gathering without the buffer of her parents or teaching colleagues. The town hall was transformed for the occasion with lanterns, autumn foliage, and trestled tables laden with food. A small band played lively tunes as couples twirled across the wooden floor. Elizabeth paused in the doorway, momentarily overwhelmed by the noise and activity. "Miss Vance, you decided to come after all." Elizabeth turned to find Bryce O'Malley approaching, looking markedly different from their first meeting. His usual cowboy attire had been replaced with a well-tailored dark suit and crisp white shirt. His hair was neatly combed, though a rebellious lock still curled over his forehead. "Mr. O'Malley," she acknowledged with a nod. "Yes, I thought it prudent to meet my neighbors properly." "Well, I'm glad you did." He offered his arm. "May I escort you to the refreshment table? Mrs. Hollister's famous pie is going fast." Elizabeth hesitated before placing her hand lightly on his sleeve. "Thank you. I would hate to miss the pie after such a glowing recommendation." As they crossed the room, Elizabeth felt curious glances from the townsfolk. A few women whispered behind their fans, and several men nodded respectfully in Bryce's direction. "Everyone's staring," she murmured. "Small towns," Bryce replied with a chuckle. "A new face is big news, especially one as—" He paused, seeming to reconsider his words. "As educated and refined as yours." They reached the food table, where an impressive array of pies, cakes, and savory dishes awaited. A plump, cheerful woman in her 50s waved enthusiastically. "There you are, Bryce O'Malley. I was beginning to think you'd forgotten us common folk now that your ranch is doing so well." She turned to Elizabeth with undisguised curiosity. "And you must be Miss Vance." "I'm Martha Hollister. My husband and I run the general store." "Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Hollister," Elizabeth replied. "I've heard wonderful things about your baking skills." Martha beamed. "Has this rascal been singing my praises? Don't believe half of what he says." She cut a generous slice of pie and handed it to Elizabeth. "But do try the pie and tell me what you think." Elizabeth took a bite and couldn't suppress a smile of appreciation. "It's magnificent. I've never tasted anything like it." "Family secret," Martha declared proudly. "Now, tell me all about Boston. I've always wanted to visit the East." For the next half hour, Elizabeth found herself surrounded by curious townspeople eager to meet the newcomer. To her surprise, most were genuinely welcoming, though their questions sometimes veered toward the personal. Was she really planning to run the bookshop alone? Had she left a beau behind in Boston? Didn't she find Copper Creek terribly primitive after city life? Throughout it all, Bryce remained nearby, occasionally rescuing her from the more persistent questioners with a well-timed comment or introduction to another resident. Elizabeth was grudgingly grateful for his presence, especially when the conversation turned to topics that might have revealed her private heartache. As the evening progressed, the band struck up a waltz. Couples moved to the dance floor, and Elizabeth found herself standing awkwardly at the edge of the room. "Would you care to dance, Miss Vance?" Bryce appeared at her side, offering his hand. "I thought you weren't much for dancing," she reminded him. "I'm not," he admitted, "but I'll make an exception tonight if you will." Elizabeth looked at his outstretched hand and made a split-second decision. "Very well, Mr. O'Malley. But I warn you, it's been some time since I've waltzed. That makes two of us." His hand was warm and calloused as it closed around hers, guiding her to the dance floor. When he placed his other hand respectfully at her waist, Elizabeth felt an unexpected jolt of awareness. She had danced with men before, but something about Bryce O'Malley's touch felt different, steady, certain, but gentle. "You're full of surprises, Mr. O'Malley," she said as they began moving to the music. "Poetry, philosophy, and now dancing. A man contains multitudes, as Whitman would say." His eyes crinkled with amusement. "And what about you, Miss Vance? What surprises lie beneath that proper Boston exterior?" The question, though lightly posed, touched a nerve. "Perhaps I prefer to remain a mystery," she replied more stiffly than intended. Bryce studied her face. "I've offended you. My apologies." "No," Elizabeth sighed. "I'm just unaccustomed to such direct questions. In Boston, conversation follows more predictable patterns.
Ah, yes.
Weather, literature, and the shocking price of tea these days," he teased gently. "Out here, we tend to speak more plainly. So I've noticed." Despite herself, Elizabeth smiled. "It's actually rather refreshing most of the time. But not always." Bryce guided her through a turn, his steps surprisingly graceful for a man who spent his days on horseback. "Some questions touch on matters that are private." Elizabeth met his gaze directly. "Not everything is open for discussion, even in the forthright West." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "Fair enough, Miss Vance. We all have parts of ourselves we keep hidden." He glanced around the room. "For instance, not a soul here knows that I once considered becoming a doctor before my father's death left me responsible for my family's ranch in Texas." Elizabeth looked at him with new interest. "A doctor? That's quite different from ranching." "Is it?" Bryce shrugged. "Both require understanding of life's fragility, attention to detail, and steady hands in a crisis. But fate had other plans for me." "Do you regret it?" The question slipped out before Elizabeth could stop herself. Bryce was quiet for a moment, his steps never faltering. "I used to. For years, I carried resentment like an extra saddle. But then I realized something: the path I didn't take wasn't necessarily better, just different." The music began to fade, and Bryce slowed their movements. "Perhaps that's true for all of us, Miss Vance. The road's not taken on us only if we let them." Their dance ended, but Elizabeth found herself reluctant to step away. There was something comforting about this man's straightforward manner and unexpected depth. "Thank you for the dance, Mr. O'Malley," she said finally, "and for the philosophical interlude." "My pleasure, Miss Vance." He released her, but remained close. "Would you care to step outside for some air? These gatherings can become rather stifling." Elizabeth hesitated only briefly before nodding. Some air would be welcome. Bryce offered his arm again, and they made their way through the crowd to the back door of the town hall, which opened onto a small garden area. The night air was cool and refreshing after the stuffy warmth inside. Stars blanketed the sky in a display that still took Elizabeth's breath away after weeks in Arizona territory. "The stars are one thing I never tire of out here," Bryce commented, following her gaze upward. In Boston, can you see them like this? Hardly at all, Elizabeth admitted. The city lights obscure all but the brightest stars. This is like looking into infinity. They stood in companionable silence for a moment, the music from inside creating a distant backdrop to the night sounds. May I ask you something, Miss Vance? Bryce's voice was quiet. Elizabeth tensed slightly. You may ask. I may choose not to answer. Fair enough. He turned to face her. Why did you really come to Copper Creek? It's clear you're educated and refined. You could have found a teaching position in any number of eastern cities after your parents passed. The question cut close to her hidden wounds. Elizabeth considered deflecting again but found herself wanting to offer this man at least a partial truth. I needed a fresh start, she said finally. Boston held too many expectations I could never fulfill. Too many pitying glances from people who thought they knew my future. And what future did they envision for you? Elizabeth's laugh held little humor. The only future considered appropriate for women: marriage to a suitable man, a household to manage, children to raise. She turned away, staring into the darkness. When it became clear that path was complicated for me, I became an object of sympathy. Poor Elizabeth Vance, still unmarried and teaching other people's children. Bryce was quiet for a long moment. People can be cruel without intending to be. Yes, Elizabeth agreed softly. They can. For what it's worth, he continued, I think running a bookshop in a frontier town takes more courage and intelligence than following a prescribed path in Boston society. Elizabeth turned back to him, studying his face in the moonlight. Are you always this kind to strangers, Mr. O'Malley? Only the ones who appreciate Emerson, he replied with a small smile. And please call me Bryce. Mr. O'Malley makes me feel like my father. Then you must call me Elizabeth. Elizabeth, he repeated, and something in the way he said her name sent a warm current through her body. It suits you, dignified, but with hidden strength. Before she could respond, the back door opened, spilling light and music into the garden. Martha Hollister's round face appeared. There you are. They're announcing the pie contest winners. Come inside, both of you. Elizabeth and Bryce exchanged a look of shared amusement before following Martha back to the celebration. The moment of connection was broken, but something had shifted between them, a foundation laid for what might become friendship, or perhaps something more. The following weeks brought a rhythm to Elizabeth's life in Copper Creek. The bookshop thrived as word spread about the educated Easterner who could recommend the perfect book for any occasion. She started a weekly reading circle for the town's children, sharing stories and encouraging literacy in a community where formal education was limited. Bryce O'Malley became a regular visitor to the shop, stopping by whenever his ranch business brought him to town. Their conversations ranged from literature to philosophy to the practicalities of frontier life. Elizabeth found herself looking forward to these visits, preparing interesting books she thought might appeal to him, and saving anecdotes about peculiar customers to share. On a crisp October afternoon, Elizabeth was shelving new inventory when the shop bell jingled. She turned, expecting to see Mrs. Hollister or perhaps the blacksmith's wife, who had developed a taste for romance novels. Instead, Bryce stood in the doorway, his hat in his hands and an unusually serious expression on his face. Bryce, she greeted him, her smile fading as she noted his demeanor. Is everything all right? Elizabeth. He stepped further into the shop. I need a favor if you're willing. Of course. What can I do? Bryce ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she'd come to recognize as a sign of discomfort. One of my ranch hands, Miguel, has a daughter, Lucia. She's 14 and bright as a new penny, but her English reading skills are limited. Her mother died last winter, and Miguel worries she's becoming withdrawn. You want me to teach her? Elizabeth guessed. If you would consider it. Bryce's expression softened. Miguel can pay a small amount, and I would cover the rest. She deserves a chance at education. Elizabeth felt a familiar pang the teacher in her responding to a child's need, mingled with the ever-present ache of knowing she would never have a daughter of her own to nurture. I would be happy to teach her, but I won't accept payment from you. Elizabeth, no, Bryce. She held up a hand. Whatever modest fee Miguel can afford is sufficient. Teaching is my calling, not a favor to you. He studied her for a moment before nodding. You're a remarkable woman, Elizabeth Vance. The compliment sent warmth spreading through her chest. When would you like to bring Lucia to the shop? Actually, I was hoping you might consider coming to the ranch. Bryce's request came hesitantly. Miguel can't easily leave his duties, and Lucia helps with the household. If you could visit once or twice a week, perhaps stay for dinner. Elizabeth raised an eyebrow. That's quite a commitment of time. I know it's asking a lot, Bryce acknowledged. But I could arrange transportation. My foreman, Jenkins, comes to town regularly for supplies. And the propriety of such an arrangement? Elizabeth asked pointedly. A single woman visiting a bachelor's ranch regularly would certainly set tongues wagging in Copper Creek. Bryce's expression grew serious. You'd be there as Lucia's teacher, nothing more. But if you're concerned about appearances, Jenkins's wife could accompany you. She helps with the household at the ranch. Elizabeth considered the proposal. The thought of regular rides into the countryside was appealing, as was the opportunity to teach again. And if she were honest with herself, the chance to see more of Bryce's world intrigued her. Very well, she decided. I'll come twice a week, Tuesdays and Fridays, if that suits. I can close the shop early on those days. Relief and pleasure transformed Bryce's face. Thank you, Elizabeth. This means more than you know to Miguel, to Lucia, and to me. I haven't done anything yet, she reminded him. But you will. His confidence in her was both flattering and intimidating. Can you start this Friday? I'll send Jenkins with the wagon at 3 o'clock. I'll be ready. Elizabeth brushed dust from her hands. Now, was there a book you were looking for today, or was this request your only purpose? Actually, I was hoping you might recommend something for Lucia. Something to capture a young girl's imagination. Elizabeth moved to a shelf near the window. I have just the thing. Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. It's the story of 4 sisters growing up during the Civil War, their dreams, disappointments, and triumphs. Sounds perfect. Bryce accepted the volume. What do I owe you? Consider it a gift for Lucia. Elizabeth smiled. A welcome to the world of literature. Bryce's gaze held hers for a moment longer than necessary. You have a generous heart, Elizabeth. Not particularly, she demurred. I simply believe in the power of books to change lives. As do I. He placed his hat on his head. Until Friday, then. Elizabeth watched him leave, a mixture of excitement and trepidation coursing through her. What had started as a simple business relationship was evolving into something she couldn't quite define, not quite friendship, not quite courtship, but something with undercurrents that both thrilled and frightened her. Friday afternoon arrived with clear skies and mild temperatures, perfect weather for Elizabeth's first journey to the Double Circle Ranch. She closed the shop at 2:30, giving herself time to change into a practical riding outfit of dark brown skirt and matching jacket over a cream blouse. She packed a satchel with teaching materials, including primers, paper, pencils, and a few simple books in addition to Little Women. Precisely at 3 o'clock, a wagon pulled up outside the bookshop. A weather-beaten man in his 50s climbed down and approached the door. Miss Vance, he called, removing his hat. Jenkins from the Double Circle. Boss sent me to fetch you. Right on time, Mr. Jenkins, Elizabeth replied, locking the shop door behind her. I appreciate the ride. Just Jenkins, madam. Everybody calls me that. He took her satchel and helped her up to the wagon seat. This here's my wife, Ada. A thin woman with kind eyes and gray-streaked hair nodded from the wagon. Pleased to meet you, Miss Vance. Mr. O'Malley speaks highly of you. Please call me Elizabeth. She settled on the seat beside Ada as Jenkins climbed up and took the reins. I understand you help manage the household at the ranch? That I do, Ada confirmed as the wagon lurched forward. Been with Mr. O'Malley since he bought the place 8 years ago. Fine man and a fair employer. He mentioned you might accompany me on these teaching visits, Elizabeth said carefully. I wouldn't want to impose on your time. Ada waved a dismissive hand. No imposition. I'm usually heading back to the ranch anyway after shopping in town. Besides, a woman needs female company now and then, especially in cattle country. The 10-mile journey passed pleasantly as Ada pointed out landmarks and shared stories about the area's history. Elizabeth found herself relaxing in the older woman's company, her initial concerns about propriety fading as she realized Ada would be a sensible chaperone and potentially a friend. The Double Circle Ranch came into view as they crested a gentle rise, a sprawling complex of buildings nestled in a valley with mountains rising in the distance. A large 2-story house formed the centerpiece, surrounded by barns, corrals, bunkhouses, and outbuildings. Cattle grazed on the surrounding grasslands, and cowboys on horseback moved among the herds. It's larger than I expected, Elizabeth remarked, taking in the scale of the operation. Mr. O'Malley started small, Jenkins replied, but he's got a good head for business. Reinvested every profit, expanded smart-like. Now the Double Circle's one of the biggest spreads in the territory. They pulled up to the main house, a handsome structure built of local stone and timber with a wide veranda wrapping around the front. Before Jenkins could help Elizabeth down, the front door opened and Bryce emerged, followed by a slender teenage girl with long dark braids and apprehensive eyes. Welcome to the Double Circle, Bryce called, crossing to the wagon. His usual cowboy attire was replaced by clean work clothes, and his hair was freshly trimmed. How was the journey? Quite pleasant, Elizabeth replied as he offered his hand to help her down. The brief contact sent a now familiar warmth through her fingers. You have a beautiful property, Mr. O'Malley. Thank you. A hint of pride colored his voice before he turned to the girl beside him. Elizabeth, this is Lucia Hernandez. Lucia, this is Miss Vance, the teacher I told you about. Elizabeth smiled at the girl, noting her nervous posture and downcast eyes. Hello, Lucia. I'm very pleased to meet you. Hello, Miss Vance, Lucia responded quietly, her English accented but clear. Your father works with the horses, correct? Elizabeth asked, recalling details from Bryce's description. Lucia's eyes widened slightly in surprise. Yes, Mississippi. He is the horse trainer. Mr. O'Malley tells me you're very bright. I'm looking forward to our lessons together. A hint of a smile touched the girl's lips. Gracias, Miss Vance. Why don't we get settled inside? Bryce suggested. Ada has prepared coffee and refreshments in the study, which you can use for your lessons. Elizabeth followed Bryce and Lucia into the house, with Jenkins and Ada heading toward what appeared to be the kitchen entrance. The interior of the ranch house surprised Elizabeth with its refined comfort. Though undeniably masculine in its dark woods and leather furniture, the rooms were well appointed with quality pieces that spoke of Bryce's prosperity and taste. The study was particularly impressive, walls lined with bookshelves, a substantial desk near the window, and a sitting area with comfortable chairs arranged around a stone fireplace. A small table had been set up with books, paper, and pencils, along with a tray of coffee and pastries. This is perfect, Elizabeth said, surveying the room. You have quite a collection of books, Bryce. Reading keeps the mind sharp during long winter evenings, he replied. Please, make yourself at home. I have some business to attend to, but I'll return before dinner. After Bryce departed, Elizabeth turned her full attention to Lucia. The girl remained shy initially, but as they worked through reading exercises, her natural intelligence and eagerness to learn emerged. By the time they took a break for refreshments, Lucia was responding more confidently, asking questions, and even laughing at Elizabeth's occasional attempts at Spanish pronunciation. "You speak very well for someone still learning English," Elizabeth commented as they shared the coffee and sweet rolls Ada had provided. "My mother taught me some before she died," Lucia explained, her expression momentarily clouding. "She worked in a hotel in Santa Fe before marrying my father. She said education was important, even for girls." "Your mother was a wise woman," Elizabeth said gently. "And she would be very proud of you." Lucia nodded, blinking rapidly. "Sometimes I forget the sound of her voice. Is that terrible?" "No, querida," Elizabeth replied, using one of the few Spanish terms she knew. "It's natural. But you keep her memory alive by following her wishes for your education." They continued with the lesson, focusing on reading passages from Little Women. Lucia was entranced by the March sisters, asking questions about their world that revealed her keen mind and imagination. As the afternoon light began to fade, Bryce returned to the study, pausing in the doorway to observe them. Elizabeth became aware of his presence and looked up to find him watching with an expression that made her heart beat faster, a mixture of approval and something deeper, more personal. "How are the lessons progressing?" he asked, entering the room. "Wonderfully," Elizabeth replied. "Lucia is a natural scholar." The girl blushed at the praise but smiled proudly. "Miss Vance is very patient, Senor O'Malley." "I had no doubt she would be." Bryce's gaze lingered on Elizabeth. "Dinner will be ready soon." "Lucia, why don't you help Ada with the final preparations while I show Miss Vance the rest of the house?" After Lucia departed, Bryce offered Elizabeth his arm. "I hope I'm not pulling you away from your lesson prematurely." "Not at all." We reached a natural stopping point. Elizabeth accepted his arm, conscious of the proper distance she maintained as they left the study. "Your home is lovely, Bryce." "Not what I expected from a bachelor rancher." "What did you expect?" "Spittoons and saddles in the parlor," he teased. "Perhaps," she admitted with a smile. "Though your literary interests should have prepared me for more refinement." Bryce led her through the main rooms of the house, pointing out features and sharing stories about particular pieces of furniture or artwork. The tour ended on the veranda, where they paused to watch the sunset painting the distant mountains in shades of gold and purple. "It's breathtaking," Elizabeth murmured, drinking in the expansive vista. "This view is why I bought this particular property," Bryce confessed. "The rangeland is good, the water right solid, but it was this view that sealed my decision." A romantic decision for a practical cattleman. "We all contain contradictions, Elizabeth." He turned to face her, his expression serious. "Thank you for agreeing to teach Lucia. She's been withdrawn since her mother's death, but I saw her smile more today than in the past 6 months." Elizabeth felt a flush of pleasure at his words. "She's a delightful girl. It's my privilege to teach her. Still, it's a significant commitment of your time. I want you to know I appreciate it." Bryce hesitated, then added, "And I enjoy having you here. The ranch feels different with your presence." The intimacy of his admission hung in the air between them. Elizabeth felt simultaneously drawn to and frightened by the direction their relationship seemed to be taking. Before she could formulate a response, Ada appeared at the door. "Dinner's ready, Mr. O'Malley, Miss Vance." "Thank you, Ada." Bryce offered his arm again. "Shall we?" Dinner was served in the formal dining room, with Lucia, Jenkins, and Ada joining them at the table, an arrangement that surprised Elizabeth but spoke well of Bryce's character. The meal was simple but hearty, featuring beef from the ranch and vegetables from Ada's kitchen garden. Conversation flowed easily, with Jenkins sharing humorous stories about the day's cattle work and Lucia occasionally adding shy comments that revealed her growing comfort. Throughout the meal, Elizabeth found her gaze repeatedly drawn to Bryce at the head of the table. He presided with a natural authority tempered by genuine warmth toward those who worked for him. When their eyes occasionally met across the table, Elizabeth felt a connection that transcended their brief acquaintance. After dinner, while Ada and Lucia cleared the dishes, Bryce walked Elizabeth to the porch where Jenkins waited with the wagon. "I've arranged for Jenkins to bring you home safely," Bryce said as they stood in the gathering dusk. "Will Friday be convenient for your next visit?" "Yes, Friday would be perfect," Elizabeth replied. "I've left some reading assignments for Lucia to practice before then. She'll complete them diligently, I'm sure." Bryce hesitated, then reached for her hand. "Thank you again, Elizabeth. For everything." His touch was warm and firm, his calloused palm a reminder of the physical work that built and maintained his ranch. Elizabeth allowed her hand to remain in his a moment longer than propriety strictly permitted. "Until Friday, then," she said softly, withdrawing her hand. "Until Friday." As Jenkins drove the wagon away from the ranch house, Elizabeth glanced back to see Bryce still standing on the porch, his tall silhouette outlined against the lamplight from within. Something shifted in her heart, a recognition that her carefully constructed defenses were beginning to crumble in the face of this unexpected connection. The autumn weeks passed in a pleasant rhythm, with Elizabeth's twice-weekly visits to the double circle becoming the highlight of her routine. Lucia blossomed under her tutelage, making remarkable progress in reading, writing, and mathematics. The girl's father, Miguel, expressed his gratitude with shy courtesy whenever their paths crossed at the ranch, his pride in his daughter's accomplishments evident in his eyes. Elizabeth's relationship with Bryce evolved gradually from formal acquaintance to comfortable friendship. They shared conversations over books, discussed the challenges of their respective businesses, and occasionally rode together to check on distant parts of the ranch when Lucia's lessons were complete. Elizabeth found herself looking forward to these rides, the exhilaration of galloping across open country, the quiet moments when they would pause to admire a view, and the easy companionship that developed between them. Yet beneath this friendship, Elizabeth sensed undercurrents of something deeper. She caught Bryce watching her when he thought she wouldn't notice, his gray-blue eyes reflecting emotions that mirrored her own confusing feelings. Their hands would occasionally brush as they reached for the same book or when he helped her mount her horse, sending currents of awareness through her body that both thrilled and terrified her. Elizabeth knew she was treading dangerous ground. Despite their growing closeness, she had never revealed her greatest secret, the permanent infertility that had driven her from Boston, and that would make any romantic attachment ultimately futile. A man like Bryce O'Malley, with his successful ranch and position in the community, would naturally want children to inherit his legacy. To encourage his attention without disclosing this essential truth felt dishonest, yet Elizabeth couldn't bring herself to voice the words that would surely end whatever was developing between them. One Friday in late November, Elizabeth arrived at the ranch to find Lucia waiting eagerly with news. "Miss Vance, Senor O'Malley says we may have a Christmas celebration at the ranch, with a tree and presents and everything." The girl's excitement was infectious. "He says all the ranch hands and their families are invited, and you too, of course." "That sounds wonderful, Lucia," Elizabeth replied, smiling at the girl's enthusiasm. "When will this celebration take place?" "Christmas Eve," Bryce answered, entering the study with a stack of mail in his hands. "If you're available, that is." "I know you might have other commitments in town." "No commitments," Elizabeth assured him. "I would be delighted to attend." Relief flickered across Bryce's face. "Excellent. Lucia has been helping Ada plan the festivities. It seems my quiet ranch is about to become the social center of the county. Every home should celebrate Christmas properly," Elizabeth said, unpacking her teaching materials. "It's a time for joy and gathering. And for new beginnings," Bryce added quietly, his gaze lingering on her face before he turned to Lucia. "I'll leave you ladies to your lesson." "Elizabeth, could I speak with you afterward? There's a matter I'd like to discuss." "Of course," Elizabeth agreed, curious about his request, but focusing on the lesson ahead. The afternoon passed quickly as she and Lucia worked through increasingly challenging reading passages and arithmetic problems. The girl's progress was remarkable, a testament to her intelligence and determination. When the lesson concluded, Lucia hurried off to help Ada with dinner preparations, leaving Elizabeth to tidy the study. She was replacing books on the shelves when Bryce returned, closing the door behind him. "Lucia continues to impress me," Elizabeth commented, turning to face him. "She has a natural facility with languages and mathematics." "Thanks to your teaching." Bryce moved closer, his expression unusually serious. "Elizabeth, there's something I need to ask you." The formality in his tone made her heart beat faster. "Yes, the Christmas celebration." He hesitated, then continued with renewed determination. "I'd like you to consider staying at the ranch for a few days around Christmas. We'll have other guests. Ada's sister is visiting from Tucson, and some of the ranch hands' families will be staying over. It would be completely proper." Elizabeth was momentarily speechless. The invitation represented a significant shift in their relationship, a public acknowledgement of her importance in his life. "I'm not sure that would be wise, Bryce," she finally responded, her voice soft. "People already talk about my regular visits here. Let them talk." He stepped closer, close enough that she could detect the scent of leather and pine that always clung to him. "Elizabeth, these past months have meant a great deal to me. Surely you know that." "Bryce," she began, but he gently took her hands in his. "Please hear me out. I'm not a man given to flowery speeches or grand gestures. I believe in honest words and honorable intentions." His thumbs traced small circles on her palms, sending warmth up her arms. "From the moment you challenged me about Emerson in your bookshop, I knew you were different from any woman I'd ever met. Your intelligence, your compassion for Lucia, your quiet strength, they've all captured my heart." Elizabeth felt tears gathering behind her eyes. "Please don't," she whispered. "I must." His voice remained steady, though his eyes revealed vulnerability. "I'm asking you to consider a future here, not just as Lucia's teacher, but at my side. I believe we could build something remarkable together, Elizabeth." The words she had both longed for and dreaded hung in the air between them. Elizabeth pulled her hands free and turned away, moving to the window where the winter landscape stretched toward the mountains. "You don't know everything about me, Bryce," she said finally, her voice barely audible. "I know what matters," he countered, coming to stand behind her. "I know your character, your heart." Elizabeth closed her eyes against the pain of what she must say. "There are things in my past limitations that would make a future with me incomplete." What limitations could possibly matter to me? Bryce's reflection appeared beside hers in the window glass, his expression puzzled. Elizabeth gathered her courage and turned to face him directly. "I cannot have children, Bryce. A childhood illness left me barren. It's why I never married in Boston, why I came west to escape the pity and whispers." The words tumbled out in a rush. "A man in your position needs heirs, a complete family. I cannot give you that." She expected shock, disappointment, perhaps an awkward withdrawal. Instead, Bryce's expression softened with understanding. "Is that all?" he asked quietly. Elizabeth stared at him in confusion. "All? Isn't it enough?" I'm not most men, Elizabeth." He reached out to gently brush a tear from her cheek. "And you're not most women. Do you think I haven't noticed how you've kept a careful distance despite our growing feelings? I suspected there was something holding you back." "But surely you want children," she persisted. "A legacy for all you've built here." "What I want is a partner," Bryce replied firmly. "Someone to share my life, my thoughts, my dreams. Children would be a blessing, yes, but their absence doesn't diminish what we could have together." "You say that now," Elizabeth whispered, "but in years to come, I would still wake each morning grateful for your presence in my life." Bryce's hand moved to cup her cheek. "Elizabeth, there are many ways to create a family. Lucia already looks to you as a mother figure. There are other children in need of homes, of love. Hope dangerous. Fragile hope bloomed in Elizabeth's chest. You would consider taking in orphans? I would consider anything that would make you happy, he said simply. The double circle has room for many souls in need of a home. Elizabeth searched his face for any sign of reservation or pity and found only sincerity and affection. I never dared hope for understanding like this, she admitted. Then perhaps it's time to start hoping again. Bryce's hand slid to the nape of her neck, his touch warm and gentle. May I kiss you, Elizabeth? Her answer was to close the distance between them, her lips meeting his in a kiss that began tentatively but quickly deepened into something that spoke of longing finally acknowledged. His arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer as she raised her hands to his shoulders, feeling the solid strength of him beneath her fingers. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Bryce rested his forehead against hers. Stay for Christmas, he murmured. Give us this time to explore what we might become to each other. Elizabeth nodded, unable to find words for the emotions flooding through her. For the first time since receiving her devastating diagnosis years ago, she allowed herself to envision a future filled with love and belonging, a future she had thought forever closed to her. Yes, she whispered against his lips. Yes, I'll stay. Christmas Eve at the Double Circle Ranch exceeded Elizabeth's wildest expectations. The main house was transformed with evergreen boughs, red ribbons, and candles that cast a warm glow over the festivities. A massive pine tree stood in the parlor, decorated with paper ornaments made by Lucia and the children of the ranch hands, along with treasured heirlooms Bryce had brought from his family home in Texas. The celebration brought together everyone connected to the ranch: cowboys, household staff, the horse trainer Miguel and his daughter Lucia, and several families from neighboring properties. The dining room and kitchen overflowed with traditional holiday foods prepared by Ada and the women of the ranch community, including Elizabeth, who had contributed her mother's recipe for cranberry pudding. Throughout the evening, Elizabeth found herself at the center of the gathering, accepted and welcomed as if she had always been part of the Double Circle family. She moved easily among the guests, sharing stories, listening to the cowboys' tall tales, and helping serve the children who played exuberantly around the tree. Bryce watched her from across the room, his heart full at the sight of Elizabeth laughing with Ada's sister or kneeling to help a young child unwrap a modest gift. She belonged here, her Eastern refinement blending seamlessly with frontier practicality, her genuine warmth drawing people to her like moths to a flame. When the children had been tucked into beds and most of the adults had retired to their quarters, Bryce found Elizabeth standing alone on the veranda, wrapped in a shawl against the crisp night air. "Penny for your thoughts," he said softly, joining her at the railing. Elizabeth smiled up at him, her face luminous in the moonlight. "I was thinking how different this Christmas is from any I've known before. In Boston, the holiday was formal affairs with distant relatives, careful social obligations, and very little genuine joy. And here," Bryce slipped an arm around her waist, drawing her against his side. "Here it feels like home." She leaned into his embrace. "These past few days have been a revelation, Bryce. Watching you with your people, seeing how you've created not just a successful ranch, but a true community, it's remarkable." "It's been built over years," he replied, "with hard work and mutual respect. But it was missing something vital until recently." "And what was that?" Elizabeth asked, though her eyes suggested she already knew the answer. "You." Bryce turned to face her fully. "Elizabeth, I had a speech prepared for this moment, something eloquent and worthy of your literary sensibilities. But standing here with you under these stars, words seem inadequate." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. "This belonged to my grandmother. My grandfather carried it across Texas during the Republic days, waiting for the right moment to offer it to her. He opened the box to reveal a delicate gold ring set with a modest diamond. "I'd be honored if you would wear it now." Elizabeth's eyes widened as she looked from the ring to Bryce's face. "Are you certain?" she whispered. "Truly certain that my limitations, the only limitation I fear is a life without you in it," he interrupted gently. "Elizabeth Vance, will you marry me? Will you make the double circle your home, and its people your family?" Tears glistened in her eyes, but her smile was radiant. "Yes," she said, her voice steady and sure. "Yes to all of it, Bryce O'Malley." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then drew her into a kiss that sealed their promise beneath the vast Arizona sky. The wedding took place on a perfect spring day in April 1886. The Double Circle Ranch was transformed once again, this time with wildflowers and white ribbons decorating the courtyard where Judge Thornton from Copper Creek officiated. Elizabeth wore a gown of ivory silk that Ada and Lucia had helped alter to fit perfectly, with a crown of desert blooms in her auburn hair. Bryce stood tall in a new black suit, his eyes never leaving Elizabeth as she walked toward him on Miguel's arm. The celebration lasted well into the night, with music, dancing, and enough food to feed the entire county. Elizabeth moved through the festivities in a state of joyful disbelief, accepting congratulations from townsfolk who had come to respect the educated Easterner who had brought books and learning to their community. Later, as they stood together on the veranda of what was now their home, Bryce held his new wife close. "Happy, Mrs. O'Malley?" "Happier than I ever imagined possible," Elizabeth replied, tilting her face up for his kiss. "Thank you for showing me that my worth isn't measured by what I cannot do, but by what I can." "You have always been whole and perfect to me," Bryce murmured against her hair. "From that first day in your bookshop, I saw a woman of remarkable strength and grace." "And I saw a cowboy who defied every expectation," she countered with a smile. "Who would have thought Whitman would lead to this?" Their laughter mingled in the quiet night, a promise of the joy that would fill their home in the years to come. Life at the Double Circle settled into a rhythm that suited them both. Elizabeth continued to teach Lucia, but also expanded her educational efforts to include the children of the ranch hands and neighboring properties. She maintained ownership of the bookshop in town, hiring a young woman named Sarah to manage daily operations while Elizabeth focused on ordering inventory and special community events. Bryce's cattle operation flourished under his careful management, allowing them to expand their charitable efforts. Together, they established a small school on the ranch property, officially hiring a teacher from Denver who shared Elizabeth's progressive educational philosophy. Their first Christmas as husband and wife brought an unexpected gift. A tragic accident at a mining camp 50 miles away left 3 young siblings orphaned and facing separation. When Bryce heard the news, he exchanged a single glance with Elizabeth before riding out to investigate. He returned 3 days later with Emma, John, and baby Thomas bundled in blankets and looking fearfully at their new surroundings. Elizabeth's heart had immediately opened to these lost children. Within weeks, they had become an integral part of the O'Malley household. The legal adoption was finalized in the spring, giving the children the security of a permanent home and Elizabeth and Bryce the family they had both desired. As the years passed, their family continued to grow in unexpected ways. A pregnant young woman seeking work in the kitchen gave birth to a daughter she couldn't care for and left the infant in Elizabeth's arms. A half-Apache boy found wandering near the ranch boundaries after a cavalry attack on his village became their eldest son. 2 sisters whose parents died of influenza completed what Elizabeth jokingly called their collection of blessings. By 1895, the Double Circle was known throughout Arizona Territory not only for its fine cattle and horses, but for the remarkable family at its heart. The large ranch house rang with children's laughter, the patter of small feet, and Elizabeth's voice reading aloud in the evenings while Bryce listened from his favorite chair, contentment etched on his weathered face. On their 10th wedding anniversary, after the children had been tucked into bed, Bryce led Elizabeth to a hilltop overlooking the ranch. A small stone bench had been placed there, inscribed with words from Whitman. "We were together. I forget the rest." 10 years, Elizabeth marveled, sitting beside her husband as the sunset painted the valley in gold. "Sometimes it seems like yesterday that I was standing in my uncle's bookshop, wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake coming west. And now?" Bryce asked, his arms secure around her shoulders. Elizabeth surveyed the sprawling ranch below, the buildings that housed their extended family, the school that educated children for miles around, and the life they had built together. "Now I know it was the best decision I ever made." Even with all the challenges? Bryce's voice held a note of wonder. The droughts, the hard winters, 7 children with various ailments and disasters? "Especially with those," Elizabeth laughed, leaning her head against his shoulder. "Life has a way of giving you exactly what you need, even when it's not what you thought you wanted." "Like a stubborn Easterner who challenged my taste in literature?" Bryce teased. "Like a poetry-reading cowboy who refused to believe in limitations," she countered, turning in his arms to face him. "Who looked at a woman everyone else saw as incomplete and insisted she was exactly what he needed." "I was right," Bryce said simply, brushing a strand of hair now threaded with silver from her face. "You were what I needed, what the double circle needed, what those children needed. And you, Bryce O'Malley, were what I needed." Elizabeth's eyes shone with tears of gratitude. A man who saw possibilities where others saw only obstacles. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Bryce drew his wife closer. "Remember what I told you that day in the study, when you confessed your secret? That you couldn't have children?" Elizabeth nodded against his chest. "You said, 'Not with me.'" "And look at us now," he murmured, gesturing toward the ranch house where their 7 adopted children slept safely. "I'd say I was right." "Yes," Elizabeth agreed, her heart full to bursting with the love and life they had created together. "You most certainly were." They remained on the hilltop until full darkness enveloped the land, 2 people who had found in each other not just love, but a vision of what was possible when hearts refused to accept limitation. The double circle, like the wedding rings they wore, had become a symbol of their unbroken connection, a place where those who needed healing could find wholeness, and where a woman once told she was incomplete had discovered the fullness of her potential in the arms of a man who had always seen her true worth. The stars wheeled overhead, timeless witnesses to the power of love to transform what once seemed barren into a landscape rich with life and possibility, a testament to what can grow when nurtured by unwavering belief and steadfast devotion.